Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we are honored to have Acting Commander Captain Randy Moody. He is from the Aurora Police Department, and he is going to talk to us about everything from his experience with burnout all the way through to what it's like to be a commander in quite a decent sized police department. So, as always, I like to say before we get started, get a pen, get a piece of paper, or just turn your listening ears on and just take one thing away from this and start implementing it. 1 degree every day is 365-degree change in a year. So, imagine where you can be just by implementing in one new thing a day. And this episode is sponsored by Create From Why, where we help you fight through that burnout, have that enjoyment, have that excitement like you never did before or like that first day. And you just need to go to createfromwhy.com and we will organize a time to have a conversation. So, without further ado, Randy, welcome. Glad to have you here. Thanks for being here from the other side of the world. I will be over in somewhat closer to you here in a few days at the time of this recording. And tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about yourself, about your journey to get to where you are, and yeah, just your experience with burnout and that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here. I've been watching some of your videos and the class of individual that you have on there. You're really raising the bar for me. So I'm humbled to be asked to be a part of this. And this is kind of this kind of is another layer of my journey through burnout, if you will, just kind of the stuff that we've been struggling with. So I really welcome this opportunity to talk about it. I'm certainly not an expert in any of this, but I'm learning more and more about all of these different things. So I appreciate the opportunity to have the discussion. So yeah, I'm in Aurora, Colorado now. I started out, I was born and raised in Southwest Missouri, where actually I grew up playing drums and percussion and went to college to be a music teacher. And then I got to know some people in the local police department, did some ride-alongs, and then my old college roommate went on to Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and I did a ride-along with him. And the first call out of the chute, I was like, "This is what I want to do." So I looked to seek to change my major, and I decided I wanted to go in law enforcement. So right out of college, I joined the Greene County Juvenile Office there in Springfield, Missouri. And then I eventually got the job in Aurora and literally moved to Aurora, Colorado 1 week before the police academy started. I knew nobody. I literally went to my apartment and thought, what the hell have I done? But it's turned out to be great. It's, a little over 26 years. And I've had a blessed career as far as the different assignments and challenges that I've had. I love operations and being around patrol. I kind of feel like that's the boots on the ground. So while I've promoted, I always tried to be around those assignments and those men and women that really were out there every day. So I promoted pretty early in my career. I started in 96. I was promoted early in May of 2003 to sergeant. So I've been a leader in a formal role for almost 20 years now. And I've spent, like I said, most of my time around patrol and then did some community policing and then auto theft task force and then started making my way up. Spent some time in major investigations as a lieutenant. And now as a captain, I'm second in command of our District 3 station. And then we've had so much change lately that I'm now the acting commander, as you mentioned, at least for a couple more weeks. And then I just found out the other day that I'm being moved as a captain to take over our training. So I'll have all of training, field training, our electronic support section. So I'm really excited, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, to implement these things into everything that we're doing from a training standpoint. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's so important those first few months and that of being an officer or even just into a new department because it sets up the foundation for how it is. So it's amazing that you're getting this opportunity, and we've had conversations before around
Right.
this and some of the stuff the ideas that you have. I can see it's going to make a huge difference for Aurora. Not just Aurora, but I think there'll be the flow on effect in the long term as well, just nationwide even. Um,
Yeah.
just being that forefront type thing.
Yeah, because we're not alone in some of the struggles, right? It's across the country.
It's worldwide, man. It's not just even the
Yeah,
country; it's worldwide. So,
true, true.
uh, no, that's awesome, man. Oh, before I jump into kind of your experience with burnout, because I know, as I said, we've had a few conversations before now, before doing this interview. What would you define your definition of burnout as?
I think it's when the reason or the why that you're doing this, your purpose. I think when all that gets blurry, I think you're beginning to burn out. I think it's you seek a role, you seek a job in law enforcement, you seek an agency that's going to meet your style, your beliefs, and how law enforcement should or how you should police, if you will. And I think when all of that starts to blur, and you start to question, why am I here? And we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years. Why am I here doing this job? Why, I heard a buddy the other day who's since retired said for like the last year, he'd get up and sit at the end of his bed for 20 minutes, wondering why he's going into work. And I think when all of that starts to happen, I think you're really burned out. And I think that's the cumulative effect of the different stressors and the things that are going on for us that we can talk about. But, and for some people, it's a traumatic event. It's a critical incident. It's a shooting. It's a serious injury that's affected them. And we've heard your story, things like that. But it could just be a one-time incident, right? Where somebody now questions, why am I still doing this if that could happen to me? Or, I'm reacting to this in a way that I don't quite understand, and I don't know how to get through it. And so now I don't understand my purpose or my why. So I think it's when that becomes blurry, I think that's when people begin to experience that burnout. And it can lead, as we all know, down a nasty road where alcohol, suicide, those kinds of things can be really detrimental just to your life, not to mention your career.
Yeah. I believe it's interesting you say about the incident. It's also, as we've talked about as well, it's the accumulative as well.
Yeah.
I believe, and this is why now on Fight the Burnout we mostly just interview first responders, because I believe that especially police officers, we've got the most stressful job in the world, because
Right.
we don't just go to work and then we have the easy ability to turn off. Now, everybody in life has struggles to turn off from their work and that. But when we're law enforcement, we have that stress of you turn off at home, but you never really turn off, because it's not the fact of you're looking for stopping crimes or that, but it's that people don't like cops. I don't care who, if we're honest, people don't like cops. Now, there are people that
Yeah.
love cops, but if things are going wrong, they don't like, if they're on the receiving end of a police officer, they don't like it. I'm an ex-cop and I still don't like it when a cop stops me. It's like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's that, so you have that continuous stressor, and then you live in the area that you're in, and so there's that continual stress, and then you add on everything that's going on in the world right now, which I know we'll talk more about, around the media, around the politics, around all of those different pressures that are getting put onto departments. And then, as we used to say when I was frontline, shit flows downhill, and it does. It goes from the politics, it then comes into the chief, then it comes into the commanders, the captains, and it just keeps flowing down. And it feels like it just gets worse and worse at the bottom, and it's only because you just don't have that experience, I believe, to be
Yeah.
able to work through it. And if you lose that purpose, it's gone. So I love your definition of burnout. I know we've talked about, you've gone through your journey and you've had a few times where you're like, I'm tapping out. Tell us a little bit about that, what you believe led you into that state of going, well, maybe this isn't the right career for me anymore.
Yeah, I think for us here in Aurora, and I'm not alone in this, but it certainly, it hits all of us. Since the George Floyd incident, we had a similar situation in here several months earlier with an in custody death of a young Black male. And all those officers had been cleared. And then once George Floyd hit, our attorney general revisited that, right? And then there was a lot of other things that took place. We had a couple of other media incidents with officers that made not only local news, but national news. We had a chief leave and an interim chief come in. And quite honestly, that chief wasn't very well respected. And it's not just necessarily my opinion. There was eventually a vote of no confidence where she only garnered about 16 votes in her favor versus well over 400 against. So there was a leadership trust issue. Once the George Floyd thing happened, and then we started seeing protests even in Aurora, and we saw legislation here in the form of Senate Bill 217 in 2020. It literally, from the moment it was introduced, debated, passed, signed by the governor, was literally 16 days. And it attacked things like the way we use force. Yeah, and it was the first law enforcement reformation bill to pass in the country. And I think they wanted to make it that way on purpose. So all of those stressors, we started losing officers hard and heavy and fast. Since January of 2020, I think the number that we've lost is close to 300, 275 to 300. And we're slowly bringing people in. We're not able to fill our academies. So with the Senate, the city council and the legislation and all of these things going on, officers had no trust, not only in their department leadership, but in the legislators in the state and even on a local level. So the stress was very high. And you've heard the Ferguson effect. After Ferguson, where officers just responded to 911 calls, they weren't being proactive. We've seen a significant increase in crime around here. And everybody will say it's happening all over. And I'm not going to get into the politics about which cities or whatnot. I will speak to Aurora that when you have officers who were short-staffed, we have trouble filling patrol shift. And now these people are working even, 2 or 3 times harder. They don't feel like they're supported. And then going back to our incident, those officers had been cleared in that in custody death. And then when the AG got a hold of it, those officers have now since been indicted after he sat a grand jury and relooked at it. So now our officers and firefighters are awaiting trial on that case. So all of those things just have been mounting up. And so it's now, as a leader, I came down to District 3, it's been just over 2 years now. And one of my buddies came down as my commander. I say, buddy, we were in the academy together, we're good friends. And we were seeking out all the ways that we could try to help our folks, because as a leader, it's, we got to help these men and women through this, right? It's certainly not just about us, but it's compounded when we're dealing with our own burnout and why we're doing this job. And then now we have to be responsible for helping all these people for the mission. So that's kind of where I got to the point where, and a lot of my colleagues and friends were like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we going out the door? 25, 24 years on the job. Could I retire? You start to look at all these different things and you start thinking about these things. But a few things happened for me personally that really kind of woke me up to my why. Some of it was just learning about what your why is, right? Having that in your face and really asking yourself the question. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest things, and I speak so highly of my new good friend, Paul Butler, out of South Carolina. And I watched him do a presentation for Daigle Law Group. And I saw this video and I said, we need that man here to talk to us. And I reached out, and God bless him, he came out to Aurora on his own dime, met with me and Jad, and we, my buddy, the commander, and we went to dinner, and we eventually, it took us a year, but we eventually got him out to speak to all our leaders in the department. While that was going on, I've gone to several leadership classes. I went to one here at the University of Denver, which was really good. 3 days out in nature with leaders from around the metro area and the state. It was fantastic. And then some other classes after that where you still connected. And we talked about all these things, your why, your purpose. And then I made the decision to go back and get my master's. And I wasn't really sure. I wrestled with it for a long time. And I did it, my selfless plug for the University of San Diego, I did it. And it was so cathartic with the discussion boards, if you've done a program like that, and just kind of reinvigorating myself to law enforcement and leadership and why I'm here. And then being able to help our people through. So it was just a culmination of a few things that happened that I jumped on that really kind of have helped me get through it so that I can help others get through it as well.
Yeah, no, it's so important knowing that purpose, knowing why you turn up, and knowing that internal purpose that is yourself, so then you can apply it to what you're doing. Is so important, because when you actually know who you are, then you can make sure that what you're doing is serving you. And at the day that there is no way, or there is no way to shift the rules or find the light in it, then that's the moment that you're like, okay, cool, yeah, it's good to go, and you have that clarity. Yeah. But if there isn't that clarity, then you, like you said, you get to that place where you're like, well, why am I doing here? And then you start to look for the outs. You start to look for the exit door. And when you look for an exit door, you'll find it. You look around enough, you're going to find it. It's like
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. But if you also look for all the reasons why not to hit the exit door, you'll find those as well. And so I think that's so important, especially with everything going on in the last few years worldwide. That's so important. So when it comes to officers in that now that you're helping and you're commanding and that and you're in charge of. Obviously, you've got a lot of you're in that kind of that what the front line, the patrol guys say, the bosses that don't care about us. You hear that a lot. I hear it all the time. The
Right.
bosses that don't care about us. You're one of those bosses. How do you help make sure that the guys down below you, and they're not below you, the guys that you're leading as such, because I would classify from just our conversations that you're a leader, not a manager. The guys that you're leading that you're leading, how do you make sure that you're still in touch with them, that you're leading them, and you're not just managing them as such?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the most important part, that we're not just managing them. And I think, first of all, it's just being present and being there. One of the first things I did when I came down to the district, the commander and captain's office was way down the hallway. And if anybody wanted to see the captain or commander, they'd have to walk all the way down to see them. I moved my office. I actually asked our admin assistant to move, and I moved my office right there in the middle of Broadway and Main, if you will. You had the sergeant's office across the hall. You had our training classroom across the hall. You had the watch commander's office. And when my door is open, it almost backfired because everybody's coming to my office. And so I hardly ever get anything done, but I shut the door. But that was the first thing I did, because I wanted them to see me, because I had heard the complaints that they never saw their previous captain and commander. So I wanted to be present and be able to engage them on just a personal level. The other thing, again, being there in the briefings, but when Jad came down as my commander, we sat and we talked about this, because we knew there was a lot of distrust with, as I call it, the West Wing. And I said, we've got to do something with our folks down here in our district. So one of the first things we did is we wrote up what we call the pledge. And it seems kind of quirky, but I think it added a lot of value. And really the crux of the pledge talked about how, there are tough times. There will always be tough times. The world needs heroes, and you're heroes. And so as long as you keep putting the uniform on and pinning the badge on and walking through these hallways, we're going to help you. And what we meant by helping is not just we'd give them, it seems silly, give them a Keurig or give them the cubicles to do their report writing, or make sure they have what they needed physically to do the job. But more importantly, give them what they needed mentally to do the job. And whether it was helping interpret the legislation so that they could better articulate, so that they could survive, so to speak, during the calls for service and report writing and whatnot, but also just being there to answer those questions and help them emotionally, and then help them find their why, right? I can't tell you how many times I'd hear officers venting in our briefing, and I'd ask them to come to my office. And I one in particular, and I love the guy, and I asked him, I said, why are you still here? Well, I got to feed my family. No. Why are you still here? Well, I got to get, no. Why are you still here? Because the reality is, you can pass a P test, you have a good resume, you could go get a job anywhere else. And yeah, you may not get paid as much, or you may not have the benefits that you have here, but you could go do something else. So why are you still here? And then if the light comes on, because it is, I still think, the most noble profession. And I think they realize that. And I think they realize if they're not doing it, who's going to do it. The other side of that too is that sometimes you help people realize that maybe it is time to go. Yeah. And I've had good friends leave the department, and there's no loss of respect for any of them if they choose not to do it anymore. That's fine, absolutely fine. But don't get yourself caught in the middle, where you go out there and you do something that's going to get you not only hurt physically, but hurt perhaps, God forbid, get yourself indicted or get yourself arrested because you're not in the game. Your head's not in it, and you make a colossal error or mistake, and somebody either gets hurt or, you get in trouble, basically. You're disciplined or whatnot. It can ruin your career. So you have to have those conversations too, to help people and say there's no shame in leaving if that's what you choose to do. We'd rather you stay, but we all have a decision to make. So find your why. Clarify that, as you talked about the burnout. Maybe that burnout, the way out of that burnout is clarifying that why, and maybe it's another goal somewhere else. Yeah. And that's okay.
No, I love the fact that you moved your office. Like, we see it quite often that the bosses or the commander or the chief or, the guys at the top they're so removed that you have no connection with them. And when you have no connection to the top, when you get asked to do something, because you're never told to do something. Yes, policies change in that, but you're asked to do something. And you're like, you have no respect for it because there's no like and trust. In the business world, you have to be know, liked, and trusted in order to get a client on. It's the same exact thing. Cops are actually great at communication. We are some of the best communicators in the world, and we're some of the best salespeople in the world as well. We are selling somebody to put handcuffs on. Literally,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you don't want to get in a fight with somebody, you are selling them why it's so important for them to put their hands behind their back and be peaceful.
Well, of course, we always say what the best weapon you have is your mouth, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so I love the fact that you did that. You touched there for a second. I want to talk about this because I know there will be a lot of bosses out there or fresh sergeants or fresh commanders and that are like, I just have so much stuff to do. All of a sudden I've got all this paperwork and I'm no longer on the street. I'm not doing why I joined the job, or I'm not doing that exciting side of it. And so I need to focus on why I'm here. I'm here to get this paperwork, all this different stuff and that done. And so they'll close themselves off, or they'll close that door and leave it closed. What is it? What are some of the key things, maybe, the top 3 things that you do to make sure that you're able to keep that door open as much as possible and not feel overwhelmed by everybody, but also still be there for them and get your actual work done that you have to do in the office of the computer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, if I'm full disclosure, if I'm being very honest with myself, one of the things is I probably never leave the office other than going to the briefings and going to meetings. And what I mean is, I wish I went out to the road and did more, actually being in the car and did more of that. And I think that is extremely important. I think I was fortunate that I built a lot of credits, if you will, because I spent a lot of time around operations, but I wish I could go out and do more of that. But that's the sacrifice when you have people coming in and out of the time. That time that they're not doing that, that's when I get my work done. Or maybe I'm doing it at home, or I'm checking emails from home. So that could be something that I could do better in that regard. But some of it is just just staying on top of it. I'm so OCD about stuff, and I've got my calendar, and I just don't. I try not to waste a moment when I'm at work, when I can get things done. And so I think that's important. But some of the stuff that, if I remember your question correctly, is just being with the folks, saying thank you to them, being engaging with them when they're around. I think I got off track a little bit with the question, but engaging them in that way, so you're not shutting the door. So I don't have to shut the door. I can bring them in and talk. Yeah. and I guess I've gotten pretty good at that time management piece of it.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, so the question was, what are 1 to 3, 3 things that you do to make sure that you're getting your stuff done, you're not feeling overwhelmed, so you're not burning out on it, but you're also still connecting with the team. So what I heard is time management. When you're with people, be present. When they're not around and you're in work, be present with work, with the computer, with the emails, with the file, whatever you're having to do. So it's all about, what I'm hearing the major one is just be present with whatever you're doing.
Yeah. I think.
And it sounds very easy. So describe to us, how do you make sure that you're present each time? Because I know it can be very hard, because you're like, fuck, I've got these 10 different files, or 100 different files, or I've got 100 unread emails. I've got, all these different things. And this officer wants to talk to me about the incident that he just went to and get some clarity. And I need to be present with this officer. How do you make sure that you stay present with whatever you're doing in that moment?
Yeah, quite honestly, I do what it's kind of leadership 101, right? I will turn away from the computer. I try not to pay attention to that. I don't look at the text messages, the phone rings. I'll hit ignore if I have somebody in my office, because that's the most important thing going on right now. Yeah. Because if they have to, we got to make sure they feel valued, and that what they have to say is important. Because I've actually found in those conversations, you'll catch a nugget or something that is they're trying to communicate with you. Right. So they're trying to tell you this, whatever the problem is. And if you're busy doing other things and you're not paying attention, you'll miss that. And it's important to be focused, give them 100% of the attention, and you'll pick up on those things. And there's probably a reason they're in the captain's office. I mean, how many people just, hey, let's go see the captain? Why the hell would we go see the captain?
It's scary to walk in that office.
Yeah, I think it's funny too. A lot of people, I guess I don't know if it's a generational thing. I want to see the chief. Chief should be in the briefing more often. Like the old guys are like, I don't want to see the chief. The chief doesn't need to come to my briefing. Get the hell out of here. I want to go do my job. But for some reason, there's all these people that need that. So if they're in your office, there's something there's probably something going on. Now, I've known a lot of them for a long time, so sometimes they're just wanting to yuck it up, and then you have to be able to time manage, right, and say, okay, we're done yucking it up, get
Yeah.
out of here, so I
Boundaries.
can do what I need to do. Yeah, exactly, definitely boundaries. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it, the burnout piece comes down to, I probably shouldn't stay on my phone as much looking at my emails, but that's when I can clear out the stuff that I know I don't need to look at later.
Yeah.
And so that helps me just kind of filter a little bit. But then too, just coming home and trying to shut that down as best you can. Unfortunately for us, if you're in an executive role, it's really hard to shut it off because you're always, whether you're on call, depending on how the different agencies do it, you're always engaged some way, some shape, some form. We have critical incident group text, so I'm constantly getting text messages about the big things going on in the city, shootings or big accidents, whatever it is. So there's always that piece of it that's constantly just kind of chirping at your head, hey, remember me? It's work.
So I'm hugely passionate about the fact of making sure that you look after yourself, then you look after your family, your relationship, and then looking after work, and in that kind of order. And I have it in a bit of a pyramid kind of thing. So self is the base foundation, then the next smaller level is your relationship, intimate, then kids, then family, and then above that is work and everybody else. How do you, because obviously as you were just saying, you got text message groups that you're part of, you've got all these different things and that, which is fine if you know how to balance that out, because otherwise you do end up, your energy levels are so draining, you're like, then that's when you can start to resent the job as such, because you're like, it's just constantly dragging at me.
Yeah.
What do you do on a daily basis, maybe even a momentary, maybe a weekly, monthly, yearly? What are the different things that you do to make sure that you're looking after yourself, so that you're not, that energy drain isn't constantly draining the cup or in such? How are you putting that oxygen mask onto yourself first,
Yeah.
so that you can actually then put it on to all the guys that you're working with and work?
Yeah, it is certainly a challenge, and I am not perfect at it. I admire. I see your stuff online. You're always working out in the morning. I'm like, yeah, that's not what we're going to be able to talk about, because I'm not that good at that. I've gotten better. I'm trying to get better. I'm cyclical with my workouts, but doing those kinds of things, obviously, taking care of yourself physically. I told you earlier that I played drums when I was younger, and it'd been, oh my, 25, 30 years since I played. And last fall, I ended up finally buying another drum set, electronic drum set. So I can put the headphones on and just beat the crap out of those. And that's cathartic, and that's really good. Sometimes I just mindlessly watch TV, just to kind of vegetate and just kind of check out. And, I enjoy, and while I understand, you don't want to use alcohol as your outlet, but I do enjoy a nice whiskey or bourbon with my cigar. I sit on the back patio every chance I get, and just kind of think or listen to music or whatnot. Some of it too is, and it keeps me, it's more towards work, but I really try to do more teaching myself about the emotional intelligence or leadership. It's kind of become a little thing for me. Again, I can still do better, but it's kind of something I'm trying to study more of, so that I can take that back to work. And you and I talked a little bit about taking over the training academy and bringing all of these things into every aspect of our training. And so learning more about that stuff. I'm reading Daniel Goleman's book on emotional intelligence now. So it's not exactly the book that you read when you're trying to relax. I like history and biographies and things like that. I'd rather be reading that. But this is the kind of stuff that motivates me when I get to go back to work. Yes. So it's just kind of my way of checking out. But even though it sounds like I'm still kind of checked in, I guess.
No, it's awesome. And this is the thing that I realized over years, and especially lately doing a lot of this stuff and talking to guys at your level and that, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, things have to really level up. And it's that thing of what I've recognized, especially over the last couple of years since I left law enforcement, is everything I did with the intent was just for work. The only thing I really had was my 4-wheel drive. Working on my 4-wheel drive, I got a big American truck over here that, and we've talked about in the past, a big American thing, and I've lifted it and done all this different stuff to it. But even that was, the intent was for my dad, for his business. The truck was for his business. It was a promo thing.
Gotcha.
And so the intent behind it was consistently for work, for this, and so it would never feeling like I was filling my tank. Whereas as soon as I've shifted, like me training, me going for these crazy, I mean, as you said, you see me doing training stuff every single day, me doing all this personal development side of stuff. I'm doing another business course at the moment, getting more coaching in that. Now, I could sit there and go, this intent is for my work. This intent is so that I can come and help Aurora Police Department more, whoever
Right.
more, my clients more. But it's actually the intent of it is for myself. The byproduct is work. And
Yeah.
so as soon as we shift that, now it puts the energy more into ourselves. But even the fact that you're like, okay, I could do better means that you've got acceptance, which is perfect. I love everything that you said. And the fact of, oh, and it is this massive thing going around. Oh, we shouldn't be drinking in that. But the fact that you sit on the back porch and think while you have that whiskey and cigar
Yeah.
is so massive. Like so many people think, oh, I just want to have a drink to decompress. Well, it's the fact of, are you actually decompressing and having that drink as a benefit as well because you love the
Yeah.
taste of it, or are you drinking it because it fucking numbs you?
Yeah. Well, and Paul Butler said it best to me when he was out here. He said he got it from another friend. He said it's an experience,
Yeah,
and it truly is.
exactly.
It's an experience if you enjoy it. So it really is. And we have some great open space behind our house with the water running, and so it's it just, you can be quiet down there with the birds, and it can be fantastic.
No,
So
I
yeah.
love that you do that because you're disconnecting from work, but then you're still byproducting, going, okay, cool. I've learned this about myself. Now, how do I bring it to the guys, to what I'm doing? And
Yeah.
it's so amazing. I love to hear it. And for those that are listening, take some of these things away. There is no such thing as perfect. We've been grown up in this world of let's make everything perfect. Well, there is no perfect, and if things were perfect, then you'd be bored, you wouldn't be growing, and then you'd be dying.
Yeah. But I see a lot of the people that you've interviewed, and see podcasts, or everybody's got something, right? And so I'm watching these things. I'm like, holy crap! Everybody's life seems so perfect. What am I going to tell Chris? Hey Chris, I'm not perfect, but I think that's the takeaway for people, is that it is a journey that you have to stay on top of, and like you said, acceptance, recognizing what you don't know, what you can get better at, and what
Yeah,
you can do. And there's plenty of that for me. And you talk about your why. I made a note here about when you first started on the job. Everybody says they want to help somebody, and help those that can't help each other, or help themselves. But when you get into higher ranks, the why becomes, now you're helping everybody else,
yeah,
right? And so you carry that burden home with you, and it's not just about you, it's about all your people. So yeah, finding ways to decompress, and it can be anything. Sometimes just staring at the wall for some people. And again, it's sometimes I love Seinfeld, and sometimes I get on a MASH kick, so I'll just throw this on, and sometimes it's mind numbing. Sometimes I get mad at myself, if I'm being honest, because like I just spent 3 hours watching Seinfeld, but it really, when you look back on it, was just decompressing, just really just mind numbing
and
stuff.
again, if you're
And
doing
as
it
long as that doesn't,
if
I
you're
was gonna
doing
say,
it
like
from a
anything
place
else, as
of
long as
love,
that,
yeah, then
yeah,
it's
as long as that's coming in small spurts and not,
yeah.
that becomes your life.
Well,
But it's important.
as long as it's not your escape,
Yeah,
as law enforcement, and I can't remember his name, but the book, you probably have heard it, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement.
right. Gil Martin.
Yeah, yeah, and I think he's just done a new version, or a new version's coming out again. But I read that after I left law enforcement. I've been told by about a dozen different cops you should read it, and this was when I was in the depths of my darkness, as I call it.
Yeah,
And I was like, nah, and I was fighting against it. And I was like, and then I read it. I'm like, why did I fight against this? And I literally was like, holy crap, that was me. That was me. That was me. And then I'd ask my wife, did I do this? And she goes, yeah, you'd come home, you'd sit down at the TV, and literally I could stand in front of you and talk to you, and you weren't even watching the TV. And so if
yeah,
you're ever getting to that stage where you're like, shit, I just watched an hour of TV and I have no idea what I just watched.
yeah,
That's the dangerous side, because now you're escaping. Whereas if you're watching it, you're like, holy crap, that was hilarious. I absolutely then cool. My wife and
yeah,
I, we watch TV every single night. We enjoy it. And
yeah,
so it's so important. I love the things that you're doing. And for those that are coming up, in the ranks, or, just new, have those things. I ride a motorcycle, and I can't remember, Randy, if you ride at all, or if you ever have done riding,
no,
But
Every time I thought about doing it, a buddy would crash one, so I haven't.
fair enough, fair enough. But no,
I
so
can appreciate it.
yeah, well, some people driving they get the same thing, but for me riding, like literally, even if I'm commuting across town in traffic, splitting lanes, and it's literally in most motorcyclists, minds, it's like it's the most boring, mind-numbing part of riding. I still get to wherever I'm going and I'm lit up. Because
Mhm.
for me it's the intention behind the riding. It's like I'm doing this because it excites me. I get to be free on this bike. I get to move
Yeah.
around. I get to be nimble. I'm not stuck in a box where I can't like weave through traffic and have like, have a bit of fun with myself. Even if I'm sitting in the lane, I'll sit there and I'll put some music on and I'll be sitting there like kind of boogieing on it, and people probably think I'm fucking crazy, but you know it's that intent behind it. So I love that you're doing that. You've talked about the why a lot. Any listeners that are not new here know that I'm a hugely passionate person about your why and your identity and your purpose. And that's a basis around the coaching and program that I run. And so, Randy, tell me, what have you identified your why as?
Yeah. So again, like I was saying earlier, I think your why changes as you, depending on where your career takes you.
Mm-hmm.
I can sit there and tell you I still want to help people, but I'm helping people help people, right? So it
Yeah.
sounds silly, but now it's my why is about leading others and helping. We talk about leaving a leadership legacy. I
Yeah.
don't expect anybody's building statues of me or anybody else leaving the police department, but what is it they say about I think it's a Viking's death, right? Where you die twice, once when you leave the earth, and the second time somebody talks about you for the last time. So I think about my grandfather who was served in World War II, served under Patton, and I would listen to him talk about some of his leaders when he was in the military, and I just thought, how cool was it that he's talking about these guys that left such an impression on him. And I'm sure they probably have no idea that my grandfather, in his 80s at the time, are still talking about that guy. I mean, how cool is that? And I tell our folks all the time, think about, somebody you talk about now that was one of your best leaders, and you want to be remembered as one of those leaders that really made an impression. So my why is helping them find that for them, when especially our leaders, but also for our officers and our members to get through these tough times and to help find their why. And I think that's so crucial now. Our folks are so desperate and so hungry for good leadership.
Yeah.
They're looking for answers. They're like, how do we do this? Help us with this policy. How do I get through these times? Some of them dealing with things at home, and we have a fantastic wellness program in Aurora. And so they need us to do that. And so that's my why, is to be there for them. Like I talked about, moving the office, creating that pledge, being present, letting them know they can come talk to me. And I say it all the time too, is call bullshit on me if you want to. I'll talk in briefing, and sometimes I'll hit them with the hard truth. And then I'll always give them the ability. I say, does anybody want to call bullshit? You can call bullshit. And I want them to, because I like the dialogue, first of all, but it also helps me understand where they're coming from. Because you'll have people in your briefings, your folks in your briefings, that'll say stuff you're like, you holy really? Then you can call them out when they're wrong, or you can talk to them later and say, hey, we need to talk before you go out and just beat up some grandma. We need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or is everything okay at home? And I've brought them in, and then you find out that, holy crap, they just unleash, they just unload. So you have to provide that environment. I kind of went on a tangent, but you also have to provide that environment where they feel comfortable talking to you, so that you can have that dialogue and not just shut them down. But now that's a long way of saying what my why is, but I think it changes over time. And for a while there, when we were going back to burnout, for a while there, it was my why got blurry, why I was here, why I was doing what I was doing. And it's interesting, you have to recognize those things, like I mentioned Paul Butler, or making that decision to go get my master's and then do some leadership stuff, and then just who you surround yourself with. I'm kind of recognizing that, okay, I'm kind of refocusing my why, and now I have a new purpose, and so let's move forward and get excited about it. And I'm excited about going out and doing our training, like I said, and doing some of these things.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm gonna challenge you here. I'm gonna call a little bullshit
All
on
right.
you, Randy.
I like it. All bullshit.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it bullshit. Um, I believe so with the training that I have, and I know you and I are going to be. You and I are going to go through my VIP day at some stage. I'm going to take you through about 3 hours when you have time in your schedule, and
All right.
we're going to run you through this. But real
Okay.
quickly, just for listeners and that, I love how you say, your why changes over time. And the reason I call a little bit of bullshit on that is your logical why changes. Your emotional why does not.
Okay. Fair enough.
So in my training, there's two stages. There's the logical stage of my 7-step process. There's a logical stage, which does change. I recently redid my 7 steps process, and my first 4 steps are different to what they were a year and a half ago. And it's because of circumstantial stuff going on with the COVID stuff, with
Right.
where I'm in my journey with my coaching and all this kind of stuff. So it has changed. The emotional levels, though, have not. I've figured out with coaching from another coach, I've gone a layer deeper in the onion. And so
Okay.
my three emotional whys are to create experiences and joy. The next level below that is to create less pain. And the deepest level, currently where I'm at now, the deepest level that I've been able to get to, and I think I'm about as deep as it will go, but I never say never because you never stop growing, is to be seen or to help others see themselves. So to help
Okay.
myself see myself and help others see myself. That's my true why, is so that we see ourselves. So I see
Yeah.
myself. And whereas my logical whys went from wanting to travel and create an impact through travel and be able to take people on those kinds of, again, going into the emotional, the experiences, went from that to reducing control, changing so that people don't feel like they're controlled all the time. And that comes down to experiences that I've had in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And so my logical changes, but the emotional doesn't. So it'll be interesting when we go through stuff to find out your emotional, because the logical one hits you hard. But the reason that
Yeah.
they can get blurry is because it's not emotional. It's not tied to you. It's tied to external what's going on or where you're at
Yeah.
in your career or where you're at in your life, and that does change. The emotional one has been there since you were probably about 3, before 7, pre-7.
That was a long time ago, Chris. That
Yes,
was a
I
long
know it
time
was.
ago.
I know it was. I know it was.
Yeah. Long time
But
ago. No, but I love the dialogue. I love the challenge, and I love that because you've taken that why and made it very succinct, right? You're able to enumerate it and spout it off. I went through a whole big explanation, right? So that's good, and it's part of the journey that continues for me. So
yes.
yeah, I look forward to it. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, man, it's gonna be good, and it is. It's that thing because then it's not not trying to attach it to any other thing or any other person or experience or anything like that. It's yours, and so you can stay laser
Right.
focused on it, and it doesn't feel false. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm doing this because of this. I'm doing this because of that. I'm doing this because it's me. This is my identity. This is who I am.
Mhm.
What I do is policing. What I do is coaching. What I do is running a podcast. And so yeah, that's it's real powerful, and you don't lose it as easily, especially once it's locked in there. But I love your why about the leadership, about and it's driving it. I can see everything. Like our conversation is all about how am I leading people, how am I helping people lead themselves. So it's great where you're at. And as
Yeah.
we said already, if you're not growing, you're dying. So it's just that continuous growth and evolution of leadership. So I love it.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation? And you kind of said it. What's your recommendation for people if they're struggling with their why, just to kind of find that level? Obviously, I've got my system, I've got my process. People can come join it. I'm going to put a little plug in for Create from Why here. You can come and we'll take you through it, so you have that kind of clarity, and you know if now's the time to leave the job, or if, hey, actually this job is still lighting my ass up. So let's stay in it and
Yeah.
let's refocus ourselves. But what would you say for you, or how do you help those guys that you're working with, that you're leading, to identify their why?
Well, yeah, different for everybody, right? And it's that's such a broad question with a lot of different answers, of
Mm,
course, and I think a lot of it that I am finding is just helping folks remember why they got into the profession, for us, for law enforcement, or just why you're doing what you're doing to begin with. Again, I think that we lose sight of that. And I think you have to weigh that against, can you keep doing it? For some people, I saw just the internet connection's unstable. I don't know if the video went out. So is we
Yeah, it
still
was
good?
just it was a
All
little
right.
glitchy, but that's okay. Your audio was still coming through, so that was all good.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So no, I think it's a lot of times just helping those folks remember why they did it and remembering what's important, refocusing them on their priorities in life and their goals. And so reestablishing all those things or just reminding them. Because like I said earlier, I think when those things become blurry and those things become out of focus, you tend to lose that why. And so helping them find that. And the kind of like the conversation I've had with folks when it was, why are you here? And sometimes you get to why they're here and it kind of the light bulb goes off and they remember why they're here. And then it's okay, well then block out the noise. And that's the other thing too. I think a lot of it, and we talk about emotional intelligence, you and I have talked about it, is that self-awareness of what is setting you off and that self-regulation of your emotions with the whole, whatever the noise is, as we talk about, and being able to block that out. Because I've seen so many officers, they let all of that stuff affect while they're here. And then they forget these things like, you can't control that. So why are, I'm bad. I'm sometimes bad at it. I'd love to raise my emotional intelligence and I'm working on that, but it's, my mom had the serenity prayer on the wall, across stitch the serenity prayer, and I never knew what that meant until just a few years ago. Just kind of light bulb went off like, oh, that's what that was. That's emotional intelligence in a nutshell. My mom was so smart. So, and then starting to learn about emotional touch. I really think emotional intelligence with law enforcement's a game changer for us. Wow. And just those pieces of it, but it helps block that noise out. That helps make that why somewhat clearer. And it's important for us as leaders to help folks with all of that. Yes. So that's kind of why I mentioned earlier Goldman's book, and I've kind of been using that, and we're teaching new sergeants and teaching leadership when we're really putting a focus on emotional intelligence and helping people understand it. Because it's really funny, and I'll tell a side story. I've had more than one officer come to me. And again, I've known a lot of these guys for a long time. So they'll call and they'll come up and complain and they'll say, so-and-so did this, or so-and-so wrote me up, or, the hell with that boss or whatever. And then I asked them and I said, let me ask you a question. If I had told you that, or I had written you up, would you be flipping out right now like this? And the response, both times that I remember doing it, they're like, well, no. I'm like, okay, so it's not the message, it's the messenger. So what are you pissed about? Because you messed up, you earned it. Well, you're right. And then they move on. So it's, you would think that we wouldn't have to do that with grown men and women, but we do. And we have to be there and kind of point that sometimes. So again, that emotional intelligence piece is so key. And I am not an expert. I am still working on raising mine. So
I don't think there's ever an expert in it. There's people that are better at it than others. But yes, this is so important. I feel, and I want to, it just sparked something for me, and I want to know your kind of opinion or thoughts on it. With this whole, ever since George Floyd thing, there's been this whole defund the police, and there's been this, we want more mental health professionals to be with the police for these, mental health cases and things like that. And I sit there and I look at it and I go, okay, one, I've been to so many mental health stuff that when somebody calls you, you need a police presence because you need some sort of force used to start with just to calm it down. It's kind of like when you put somebody on antidepressants or something like that. It's to calm things down so that then you can get to the root cause of it. But if we were able to give officers more of that emotional intelligence like you're talking about and like we talk about, you're able to give them more of that, you would have more of a middleman, not needing the mental health professional that doesn't know how to use force, doesn't want to use force, and you wouldn't have that RoboCop of I'm here just to lock people up and that is my job. You'd have this middleman that would almost be like a Superman. You'd have a Superman in a badge that could literally understand, could have compassion, could turn up with that and actually have that conversation. Again, we talked about in the very beginning, that communication, words are everything. You would have that person in the middle that didn't necessarily need to be the mental health professional, because we don't need those at a time when somebody has a knife and they're trying to stab themselves in the chest. Or they're trying to stab somebody else, or they're trying to shoot somebody else.
Right.
But you would also not have that I'm just here for one purpose. I'm just here to use force to get the job done and then get back home.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's definitely a need for mental health professionals. I think we're finding some success with these things, but I think sometimes that what gets lost from the community is that, and I've heard some counselors or crisis negotiators, if you will, social workers say that you have to make sure the environment is safe and get that person to a safe spot mentally before you can ever do any real work, right? So when you have somebody in mental crisis that's doing something physical or threatening some physical violence, you're not going to send a counselor in there with the guy with the knife. Now, you might do those negotiations from the command post on the phone, right, so to speak, but you're not sending them. But we've been sending them with police officers. So I think that is crucial. I think those, going back to that emotional intelligence, the empathy that we talk about, is officers being able to understand, at the same time have the skills to do what they need to do from a tactical or an officer safety position, but also be able to empathize with what's going on and be able to have those communication skills to get through that themselves, and then eventually hopefully get to a safe spot where those, now you can bring the counselors and the real professionals in to really make that change. I don't know if that answered the question, or if I'm on target here with what you were thinking, but I think that empathy and those officers, teaching our officers that kind of stuff is important, because a lot of times you get officers just want to come in and just like you said, I think just take control,
Yeah.
end it. And they're not sometimes empathetic enough to want to step back and try to understand and communicate, think about different tactical ways to make it a safer spot rather than rushing in. I think that's a little bit what you were asking.
Yeah, that was along the lines of kind of what I was thinking, and that as well. No, yeah, and it's so important, because when we can empathize with somebody, I mean, I only ever had to use, you know, OC spray once, and that's because the guy assaulted my partner as he tried to evade arrest and tried to escape.
Right.
Otherwise, it was all the gift of the gab. Probably sometimes I just numbed
Right.
them to death because I talk so much. But hey, it works. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's that empathy side. And I know, like, for myself, when I started to lose that empathy side, that's when I started to burn out. I started to
Yeah.
lose, again, as we've talked about a lot, that why of why I joined the job. I don't know if you experience the same thing, but when you start to lose that empathy side and you start to look at people as just another criminal, then
Well,
you start to lose that empathy side of yourself. You start to lose the side of yourself, why you actually joined the job, why you're here, what's the
yeah.
purpose of actually being here, because you're not you. You're not actually bringing yourself to the job. You're bringing this image of a badge and vest and a gun.
Yeah. So when I was in college working towards my music education degree, and then I decided to go into law enforcement, I changed my major, and I changed it to social work. So I graduated with a bachelor's of social work degree, and I made the, you see that just as you described, you run into people, and then all of a sudden you might have empathy at the beginning, and then you don't have empathy anymore. I remember a burglary suspect we arrested who was going to get the habitual offender and was supposed to go away for a really long time. And a couple of years later, he was on the news for sexually assaulting an old lady. I'm like, how did he get out of jail? And here I was feeling bad for his sob story about having to get money for his daughter and all this stuff. I got sucked into even having any sort of, yeah, I kind of feel bad for the guy, but he's going to go to jail. And then that happens. So I made the comment one time, and it didn't really go over so well, but this job has the way of beating the social work out of you. And it has a way of, like you said, we all become cynical and just want to hate, suspicious of everyone and hate everybody and don't like people. And this job can do that to you. So yeah, it's taken a while to get over that. And I think sometimes good leaders help us remember that you can't, come on, get off of that. Let's get back to some empathy, some understanding where these people are coming from, and some of the situations they're dealing with, and not just rushing in and making judgments and doing all those things that you described as far as ending it.
Yeah, and it can and as you've even said, it can be very, very difficult to do. But if you create the habit, you can change it. The reticulating activating system in our brain, the RSA, the filter, we are in control of that. We get to train that however we want. If we want to train it to be cynical, then that's what it's going to be. If we want to train it to be compassionate but have a what's the wording that I'm looking for? Be compassionate, but also have things in place to actually know, like, have those safeties in there as well. It's like me
Yeah.
being, I don't know about you, but when I was in law enforcement a lot until I worked on myself, I couldn't go into general admissions at concerts. Like, they just freaked me out. Whereas now I can, because I know I have the training, I can rely on myself and my RSA. I've trained it to, okay, cool. If something happens, it's going to happen. I have no control over it anyways. But I know that
Right.
my training's going to kick in and I'm going to be better off than 99% of these people that are here anyways. And I
Yeah.
automatically know where all the exits are without even looking. And so I just rely on that training and that side of me. So I think it takes practice, but anybody can do it. So uh,
Yeah.
now, Randy, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, maybe they want to touch base, maybe they resonated with your story. How do they go about doing that? How would you like them to kind of contact you?
Yeah, so you can email me, rsmoody96@gmail.com. Or my cell phone number, my work cell phone number is 303-943-9670. So welcome to reach out to me, or rmoody@auroragov.org, my work email. I'm on LinkedIn. Just did that as a part of my capstone for school for my master's. So had never done it before. Now I've got all these connections. So
Yeah.
it's and I'm never on Facebook. So LinkedIn's a good way to do that as well.
Cool, perfect. Well, we'll put some of those links down in the bio down below. And the last question I like to ask people before we wrap up is, what would your top tip to self happiness be, Randy?
Yeah, I saw that when you had sent me the email about some of the questions and stuff, and I thought, wow, what is that? I think just finding what makes you happy, what you enjoy doing and doing it, and I think that's the key. I truly believe we weren't put on this planet to work, and while law enforcement is noble and it's a much needed, you know, the world needs law enforcement. We weren't put on this planet to work, in my opinion. And so find those things away from work that you enjoy doing, that give you happiness and excitement, and it takes you away from all of that other stuff, and go do it. And actually go do it, whatever that is. And it may be several things for a lot of people, but don't get so sucked into work and the grind and all of those things. And that serenity prayer is so key these days. A lot of that stuff at work you can't control, but what can you control? And those are the things, the interests and the things that you like to do. So do those things and have a good time at it. Explore, do new adventures. I'm sometimes bad at that. I don't exactly put myself out there for, you were talking about earlier about snorkeling and stuff. Yeah, I've never really snorkeled, but okay, well, let's give that a try. So I'm not very good at it, but I do the things that I enjoy. And like for me, the drums, revisiting the drums, it might be something that you did years ago that you revisit and you're like, you know what, I forgot how much I enjoyed doing this. So I'm going to seek that out. So I think just find those things that make you happy and do them. If it's family, if it's traveling, whatever it is, do it. Don't just sit around thinking about it. Go do it.
Nah, I love that. I love that, Randy. It's amazing. Any last words before we wrap up?
Well, I don't know. I didn't really plan on a last statement. I don't have anything fancy, but I think, again, like I said earlier, I think the most important part is our folks need leaders. They need good leaders, and they're so hungry for it to get them through. I constantly see things online where officers are just begrudging the agency, the profession, and I feel for those folks, but I wonder where their leaders are helping them get through it. And we talk about when our officers succeed, that's their successes. When they fail, that's ours. You know, we own those failures. So what are we doing to help our folks? They need us more than anything. And so whatever you have to do to make yourself a better leader, whether it's reading or podcasts like this, getting in touch with Chris and doing some of these things he's talking about through the burnout, just whatever you're doing to invest in yourself, ultimately should be to help your folks. So that would be my if you're going to have the rank, if you're not helping your folks, shame on you. If you're going to, heavy is the head that wears the crown, as my friend always says. So if you're going to wear the crown, so to speak, you have a lot of responsibility. And if you're letting that go to waste, shame on you.
Yeah, nah, those are some good last words, man. I love it, Randy. Well, thank you so much for being here, Randy. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, and for all those that are listening and watching, we thank you. Make sure you like and subscribe, please, so that we can get this out there even further. Make sure you share it out. Maybe there's an officer that you know. Maybe there's a family member of an officer that you know. Because as a family member of an officer, you listen to these, then you can start to kind of drop those seeds for that officer should they be already burned out, maybe, take that leadership of such. So we thank you, or maybe even put the podcast on in the background while you listen to it so they can hear it by osmosis. We have all these different options, but thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you again, Randy. And if you are struggling, if you are feeling like you're challenged, maybe you're like, hey, something resonated in here and I want to learn more, then just send me an email at team@createfromwhy.com. And I will organize a time to talk to you personally and work through whatever is going on for you at that time. Again, thank you very much. We love you all. Stay safe out there, everyone, and you are appreciated.